And our next session is about stress and how to manage it. We have a fantastic speaker, and he's a management professional with the extensive experience in corporate training and business consulting. He's an entrepreneur, having spent 15 years creating and managing startups. Currently, he works for a number of governmental institutions as an advisor. He works in the fields of robotics, artificial intelligence, healthcare, smart cities, and renewable energy. In addition to that, he also works as a lecturer on the executive MBA program at the University of Economics in Poznań, Poland. And he lectures the fields of marketing, international business, crisis management, business strategy, and lean manufacturing. Today, he would like to share his lessons about stress and how we can manage it better. So, with that, please put your hands together and give a virtual applause to Alistair Stevenson.
Hello. Well, if you've come for stress and how to manage it, you've come to the right place. Let's get this party started. So, yeah, if you've got any questions, oh, my stars. First, it would be a good idea to set off with an agenda. Stress, why is it necessary? It is indeed necessary, and we'll find out why. How it's going to affect your health, then we'll move on to fears and phobias, and then how we're going to manage stress, and then stress and business presentations. Or it could be, for example, giving a speech at a wedding, or alternatively, at some other event. Anywho, if you have any questions, please don't put your hand up because I can't see you. We'll look at questions at the end, so you can either write them in the chat or alternatively, just ask me at the end. So stress is very much a survival mechanism. If you are feeling stressed, you will be able to run faster or alternatively fight harder if attacked by another person or alternatively a wild animal. In this case, a saber-toothed tiger. So under stress conditions, the body produces two hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. Now, if adrenaline were a food or a drink, what do you think it would be? Please feel free to write that in the chat. If you, how would you imagine adrenaline to be? A banana, perhaps? No, a piece of lettuce. Red Bull, thank you, Benjamin. Yes, Red Bull, excellent. Any other ideas? Sugar? Maybe not so much, Caroline. No. Taurine, yeah, okay, that's good. Coca-Cola, yep, because it contains caffeine. So if adrenaline was, for example, a drink, it would be a thank you. That was Violetta. Yeah, if adrenaline was a drink, it would be a double espresso. It's something which is going to really wake you up really, really quickly and enable you to be able to react more quickly. But that doesn't really help you that much. It means that if you get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, you'll be in a more anxious state. So the body also produces another hormone called cortisol. Now, if cortisol were a food or a drink, what would cortisol be? What do you reckon? Lettuce, green tea, maybe not. Sugar, thank you so much, Sam, well done. What happens is your body is completely flooded with glucose, so you have the energy to be able to run away. And this explains also the link between diabetes and stress, the fact that your body is regularly being flooded with lots of glucose. So here you have two identical cavemen. For the sake of argument, let's say that they're twins. One of them has the stress gene and the other one doesn't. Because of the fact that they will be obviously feeling more stressed, statistically speaking, they'll be able to run faster or fight harder than their colleague who's calm. And as a result, their rather neurotic DNA will be passed on to future generations. So we are unfortunately genetically hardwired for stress. We're also hardwired for pessimism. Late at night, you hear the rustling in a bush. The optimist would think, oh, that might be a deer. The deer might have hurt its leg. I can creep up to the deer, hit it over the head with a club, and have a really easy supper. The pessimist will think, yeah, maybe not, it might be a bear. So as a result, what happens is that the pessimists, well, they went hungry more often than the optimists, and they missed out on some really, really easy meals. But they didn't get eaten by bears nearly as often as the optimists, and as a result, passed on their rather pessimistic DNA to future generations. So stress is everywhere. We're genetically hardwired to experience it. Now, it can be good, but only a certain amount. Robert Sapolsky from Stanford University, one of the better universities in the world, said it's anything that knocks us out of balance, be it temperature, glucose level, or blood pressure. Our frontal lobe allows us to think more deeply and more abstractly than any other animal. However, the downside of this is we can anticipate stress without it ever happening. You've all been in a situation where you've had this argument with your partner or your boss, which has never happened. It's happening in your head. Well, he'll say that. So if he says that, I'm going to say this. And then he'll say this. Well, I'm going to counter with this. And you're getting really, really stressed out. And the conversation never even takes place. You're just imagining it. And as a result, a lot of people cannot let the stress go. Right, okay, this is not for the chat, it's just for your own amusement. What is this? I'll accept antelope and you can have half a point. If you said Thomson's gazelle, give yourselves a full point. A slightly easier question, this. Again, people that said lion, give yourself a point. For the Thomson's gazelle, the next 90 seconds are absolutely critical. He'll either escape or he'll get eaten. 90 seconds later, oh my God, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. Lordy, quick scan for lions. No? Oh, look, grass. Delicious. Gazelles, Thomson's gazelles in particular, are not going to start overthinking things. They're not going to start saying, one day I'm going to be too old to run away from lions, then I'm going to be really knackered. I wish I'd listened to my mother when I was a young gazelle. I could have a place of my own by now. Gazelles are not known for their neurosis. There is no Woody Allen of the antelope world. This is something which is reserved purely for people. We will look at a stressful situation, we will revisit it years later and relive it. And it's a problem. Because 90% of people experience stress that simply does not go away, and it'll affect your body, your mind, and your behavior. Having said that, a certain amount of stress is pretty useful. So here you've got the cartoon. They put me in the FA Cup final, but I'm not really bothered. I'd rather stay home and groom my moustache. No, if you were in the FA Football Cup final, you would feel a tremendous amount of stress, but it will be positive stress and it would give you optimum performance. It's a bit of pressure. That's the reason why world records get broken at Olympic Games. If it's boring, it's because it's low pressure, low performance. You have your local football team and they are playing the under-7 scouts. They're not going to train for it. They're not going to really play particularly well. It's just going to be a bit of a boring kick around with a group of kids. If it is the local football pub league cup, oh yes, you are going to be in your optimum performance. But what happens then when your local pub team is scheduled to play FC Barcelona? That's just too much pressure. And as a result, anxiety and really poor performance. So a certain amount of stress is good, but not that much. Because it's exciting, you feel more alert and you'll perform better than someone who is calm. Again, reiterating, world records get broken at Olympic Games for a reason. The negative effects of too much stress, depression, anxiety, anger, diabetes, which is probably the link between cortisol, glucose, and diabetes. cancer, and of course, high blood pressure. Now, if you don't like spiders and if you don't like enclosed spaces, look away now. Do not look at the screen. I will tell you when it's safe to look back. There you go. A fear of spiders, commonly known as, people who said arachnophobia, give yourselves a point. A fear of confined spaces, people that said claustrophobia, give yourself a point. The rest of you, you can all look back now. There are going to be no harmful photographs coming up. A slightly more unusual phobia is anatodophobia, which is a fear of being watched by ducks. This is a Gary Larson cartoon where a man is sitting in his office, and in a building on the other side of the road, you can see that ducks are watching his every move. It is a real phobia. It's an unusual one, but it's one that people every year go to visit psychiatrists about. Now, no prizes for guessing what is the most common of all fears and phobia. That's right, it's public speaking. Number one. If you look at some of the great comics of history, people like Tommy Cooper, people like Eric Morecambe, recently the stand-up comedian Incognito, they all had heart attacks and died on stage because public speaking is a top 6 trigger of a heart attack. Death is ranked here in 7th position. So the next part of this morning's exciting quiz, who's this? President from history. People that said George W. Bush, give yourselves a point. Slightly more difficult question, who's in the box? I'll give you a clue, it's a former president. The president between Jimmy Carter and Richard Nixon. So it went Nixon, the guy in the box, and then Jimmy Carter. That's right, Gerald Ford. Arguably not one of the greatest presidents, but then again, neither was W. So statistically speaking, you are more afraid of being here than being here. You're more afraid of being the guy talking about the guy in the box than being the guy in the box. Now, glossophobia is the fear of public speaking, and it comes from glosso, the Greek word for tongue, and phobos, well, the word for fear or phobia, if you wish. Very real, very common, primordial, and ancient. Now, obviously, you're sitting here thinking, Alistair, you're being silly. You're talking earlier about cavemen, and now you're talking about the fear of public speaking, etc. It's the 21st century, and we've all got electric lights, and there's nothing to be worried about. Well, here's your homework assignment. Tonight, go to a piece of woodland, go for a walk in the dark, and wait till you hear the sound of a twig snapping behind you, and describe the feeling. Is it a nice feeling? Because I'm willing to bet dollars to donuts, it's probably not. Now, obviously, a fear of public speaking can be worse than the fear of death for the following reasons. Firstly, you're only going to die once. If you don't like public speaking, but you're any good at it, you might have to do a business presentation every week. So as a result, it's going to be much more frequent than dying. And offices today are really quite safe places. I mean, nobody has a horrific death because they fell into the photocopier or something like that. So generally speaking, a fear of public speaking is something which is far more prominent and pronounced than a fear of death. Now, I've done a lot of research. There's not a lot of research out there on the underlying causes, so I have my own theory. Here we have ancient public speaker from history. And here is the chief of the tribe, the guy holding the spear, and you have someone addressing the rest of the crowd who is trying to point out that mammoth hunting has become particularly dangerous and they need to exercise a certain number of precautions. Unfortunately, the language is not particularly sophisticated, so the leader considers this to be a challenge to his authority, and you're banished from the tribe. You then have to live completely on your own in the wilderness. You won't starve to death because you'll still be able to survive by eating things like frogs and worms and insects and berries. You won't be able to go hunting because if you go hunting, the fire will go out. So you'll spend most of your time gathering firewood to keep yourself warm at night and to keep the wild animals at bay. but you'll be just scavenging on what you can find in your locale. You might live for a year before you finally die of starvation, alone, cold, afraid. Really, this is very much a worse death than just being eaten by some large predatory animal. And this is probably the underlying reason why a fear of public speaking is so prevalent, because we're hardwired for the fact that the leader and the tribe might feel challenged, and as a result, we might be expelled. Right, famous singer from history, people that said, Frank Sinatra, give yourself a point. We are really racking the points up this morning. Frank Sinatra was so terrified of performing that he said that he didn't even start to relax until he'd sung at least 5 songs. And the day that he didn't feel frightened was the day that he'd retired. As a result, that fear gave him an incredible ability to perform because he channeled it. And the paradox of public speaking is that the people who are most frightened are usually the best public speakers because their performance is high definition. They don't leave anything to chance. In contrast to the university professor from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, when asked about a bill which was used to stimulate the economy, well, can anyone remember the name of the bill? Anyone? Anyone? No? Okay. Well, did it work then? Anyone? Anyone? No. The United States fell into an even greater depression. Everyone remembers going to university and having the guy that clearly has no fear of public speaking whatsoever, and as a result gives absolutely dreadful performances. Why would you want to subject your body and nerves to this terrible ordeal? Well, Stanford University, which is ranked number 2 in the world after MIT, and along with AT&T, the American telecoms company, found that the number 1 predictor of success and being promoted at work was the ability to speak in public. I made it to vice president of the largest independent medical publishing house in Europe. As I'm sure you've probably gathered already, I'm a complete nincompoop. It was not because of talent, it was because of my ability to be able to stand in front of crowds, usually people from the American Medical Association, and talk with authority. It had nothing to do with my competence or ability. So there's certainly something about the ability to be able to speak well in public, which is important. Coping with fear. Well, if you go to Toastmasters, a lot of you already know this, but you need to practice, know your audience. A joke that you will tell at the rugby club dinner will not go down anywhere near as well at a kindergarten gathering. Prepare, video yourself giving the presentation so you can look for any irritating eccentricities that you've developed. Have a backup plan. If you're going away to a conference and you're a guest speaker, do not experiment with caffeine. Do not think, oh, the coffee's free here, so I might as well have 10 double espressos. No, that is not the time to be experimenting with high dosages of caffeine. It will do nothing for your nerves. You can relabel your nerves and say, I'm not frightened, I'm excited. It might work for you, doesn't work for me. You can tense and relax. You can start deep breathing, and then you can start and maintain eye contact with your audience. There's a guy on YouTube, he's an absolutely lovely guy. It's a site called A Life Less Anxious. He is a really, really decent, sincere human being, and he suffers from terrible panic attacks. So what he does, he takes his body, he closes his eyes, he strains, and he tenses every single muscle and then releases. And that prevents him having panic attacks. Now, that does work, but if you're the next speaker to go on and give a conference, or if you're giving a presentation to senior management and you start doing this, they'll call an ambulance. It looks like you're having a stroke. So it's a good technique, but it will not work when you really need it. Same with yoga. Yoga works really well with me, but again, you can't use it when you really need it. So for example, you're giving a presentation at work and they say, well, you seem to have used the data from 2015. What? Yeah, we rather expecting a presentation with the data from 2020. Oh, hang on, give me a second while I transition into downward facing dog. Again, yoga, really helpful, but you can't use it when you need it. So what you need to do is to have a technique which works incredibly effectively, but no one can see you using it. So this is now a question for the chat. Could you please write what you think is the most stressful job in the world? The job which is going to cause most stress. Air traffic controller, great, thank you. We've got surgeon, parent, conference director, IT job, managing expectations, okay. Right, air traffic control. Worst case scenario, the plane from Alicante crashes into the plane from Barcelona. You kill 400 people, but you're going to go home at night, okay. You'll probably suffer from guilt, and you'll probably have to go on a course, and you'll probably have a lot of counseling, but you're not going to die. Parent, again, stressful, but probably you're not going to die doing the job. Train driver, again, you have a bad day, you might kill yourself, you might kill somebody else, you might kill your passengers, but it's not the number one. Bomb disposal, well done, Sam, that's a good one. Yeah, you have a bad day, you get blown up. That is really, really bad on the nerves, to be perfectly fair. Airline pilot, firefighter, from the research that I've done, probably special forces, in particular, an organization like the Navy SEALs. Now, I'm not a big fan of the Navy SEALs. There's a little bit too much testosterone for my liking, but they have developed a very good system to calm people down in crisis so that you can perform really well. Because everybody knows that when you're in a crisis situation, you develop tunnel vision. If you overtake a car and you've miscalculated and you think you're going to die, all you can see is the car that's coming towards you, and you can actually focus on the look of horror in the other driver's face. Now, if you go and kick a door in and go into a room, you're just focused straight in front of you because you've got tunnel vision, and you don't see the guy behind the door who shoots you in the back of the head. So what you have to do is very, very quickly find a way of becoming calm to give a really good performance. And also as well, fortunately, this is something which no one can detect that you're doing. So we're going to have to practice it. The reason for is the text which I took off Active SG's site. The front crawl requires you to flutter kick your feet while reaching forward with alternating strokes. Keep your body flat, lie facing down in the water with your body kept in line with the water surface. Your arm movements can be broken down to the simplest form consisting of two actions, the pull and recovery. Choosing a side to breathe will depend on being left or right-handed. With ankles relaxed, flexible, point your toes behind you and kick up and down with continuous motion from your thighs. Well, as a result of this, none of us are ever going to drown now because we all know how to do the front crawl. If only life were that simple. So together, we're going to have to practice this technique. What you do is you breathe in for a count of 4. You hold your breath for a count of 7. You breathe out for a count of 7. So we're going to do it together. Breathe in, hold. Breathe out. Breathe in, hold. Breathe out. Breathe in, hold. Breathe out. Now, after you've done that for 5 or 6 times, it's incredible how calm you feel. Obviously, no one can see you doing it. No one can realize that you're stressed out and you're calming yourself down. Obviously, try not to say things like hold, breathe in, breathe out. But apart from that, it's something which you can do really clandestinely. The US government has spent 40 years and millions of dollars trying to research to find the best way of getting people to calm down before particularly stressful incidents, and this seems to be the best way. COVID. Again, this is something I work for the National Health Service in a mental health trust as a project manager, and COVID has not been good for people's mental health. In the small town that I live in, there has been a 3-time increase in wives being attacked by their husbands because of the lockdown conditions. Again, it doesn't matter what the type of stress you're facing, this will help. This will stop you from becoming overstimulated, overexcited, and anxious. So it's a very, very good technique. Presentations and stress. Well, directions are going to be intellectual, verbal, or physical. Intellectual, your mind goes blank, you forget the name, you cannot remember the name of your boss or the person who's just introduced you. You stare in panic at one audience member. It's often, unfortunately, an audience member of the opposite sex, which kind of looks really bad. And then you realize just how completely and totally spirit-crushingly boring you sound. Verbal crutches. Obviously, Toastmasters can help with that, but that's clearly a sign of presentation stress. And the physical, you'll start sweating. I've seen people have panic attacks, parched mouth syndrome, where your mouth dries up. A good technique is you bring your own bottled water in one of those sports drinks holders with some lime juice. Whatever you do, don't try and pour water from the bottle into a glass at a conference, because you'll start shaking. And the more you try and control the shakes, the worse it's going to get. You can start waving your hands uncontrollably. You'll get rapid arm movement. Your voice will become really, really squeaky. And generally speaking, worst case scenario, you start fainting. So lack of preparation is one of the main glossophobia triggers. And then a fear of making a fool of yourself, or the way that you look, and a fear of making mistakes. So you strive for perfection. And also as well, a lack of experience is not going to help. This works for some people. Rather than thinking that you have to be perfect, give yourself a self-compassionate hug where you rub your shoulders and remember that nothing bad can happen. And rather than saying you're frightened, relabel it as feeling excited. Might work for you, doesn't work terribly well for me. But prepare properly. Write a script, practice it, throw it away. Do not try and memorize your speech, because after the first 30 seconds, you will forget the next word and completely and totally go to pieces. Stanford University, the best way of starting a speech, you smile, you raise your eyebrows, having first scanned the room, and that's it. You just get into it and you start. Obviously, it's a good idea to finish your presentation. If you're giving a presentation at least once before, or a week before, give it to a colleague to review, because you will never spot your mistakes until you come to give the presentation. You'll have proofread it, and then when you're standing in front of an audience, you'll notice every single mistake, because you feel that you've just had 10 double espressos. And that adrenaline will enable you to find everything that's wrong with the presentation. Just don't point it out. Probably no one else has realized it either. It's a good idea to predict questions and then make slides that answer that question. And if you can, have at least 3 practice runs with the audience beforehand. And even try and practice at the venue. Always be really nice to the technician at the conference venue. I've seen a lot of people at conferences that I've given who are stressed out, who are very, very angry and rude to the technician. It's never a good idea. There are 7 billion people on the planet, but there is only one that matters, because that's the person who is going to help you if things go horribly wrong. So always be nice to the technician. Now, question for you, and here's a clue. This is something which Toastmasters does not teach us. What is the most stressful part of any presentation? Please write it in the chat. The most stressful part of any presentation. The beginning, just before you start, the prep, okay. Starting, okay, cool. Introduction, yeah. Well, I would argue, and unfortunately I've clicked on the next slide, that the question and answer session is without doubt the worst part. I've seen people's careers ruined because of Q&A at the end of a presentation. If you work in sales, I've even seen people buy the ticket to the conference so that they can make you look really stupid in front of your customers and use that in order to steal your clients. It's a bad business, it happens. It's a flashback to your school days where you're made to look foolish because you don't know the answer to a question. The Q&A is definitely the most stressful part of a presentation because it's the thing that you can't really always prepare for. Now, what happens, your mind goes blank, you don't listen to the question, adrenaline kicks in, you want to run off the stage, you simply cannot think. What helps in this situation is to ask the speaker for their name. If it's a business, if you're in a business conference, try and find out the name of the company. Ah, and what's your name, sir? And, oh, one of the competitors, ladies and gentlemen. But what you're doing here is you're framing it, and at least you're humanizing the interaction. Acknowledge the question. Say it's an interesting question rather than say it's a good question, because the question could be, why are you so incompetent? Why is your company run by thieves? You don't want to say that's a good question. You want to say, well, that's an interesting question. Flatter the person who is asking the question and give yourself time to think. A lot of the time I've seen answers which are theater. Oh, let me think about that. That's a, ooh. And the golden rule in many cases is to try and hand it back to the audience. To say, does anyone know the answer to that question? That way you don't feel so bad when you can't answer it yourself. Providing, of course, you should know the answer. Well, that's it. That's 30 minutes up. It's been fab. I think now would be time for questions and answers.
And before that, let me just thank you, Alice. That was amazing. Thank you so much. And can I just remark on when you were speaking towards the end, I loved your body language when you were just doing this. You were so relaxed. There was no stress there at all.
Thank you.
And audience, do you have any questions for Alistair? I do have a question for you, Alistair, from Abby, asking, yes. Can you tell us more about a stress gene?
Personally, I don't believe I'm the most competent person to be asking this, to be answering this question. What we have found is that we are hardwired for negativity because it's a survival mechanism. So we're also hardwired for feeling stress in situations because it's enabled us to be able to fight or escape predators. By the same rationale, we're also this is something which I find in lean manufacturing and problem solving. There are systems like Lean Six Sigma, which enable you to look at how to define problems and how to solve those problems. But what happens is that people just jump at the first possible solution. Again, it's a survival mechanism. If, say, for example, 1,000 years ago, you see a tiger, rather than analyzing the situation and thinking, tiger, distance from me to tiger, 50 meters. Weight of tiger, 320 kilograms. Weight of me, about 100. Speed of tiger, 65 kilometers an hour. Speed of me, 15. With the tiger behind me, probably 20. Time to impact, bearing in mind that tiger's already started his run, again, it's too late. Generally speaking, the people who were happy, optimistic, felt positive about things, analyzed the problem thoroughly, they got eaten millennia ago and didn't pass their DNA on to future generations. So as a result, that's in a position, you know, you're in a situation where you can kind of only play with the deck of cards you've been dealt. But some brilliant questions that are coming through. I said, throw away the script, but how do I know to keep going if you go blank during the speech? Fantastic. Okay, cool. So the best thing to do is to have business cards, backs of business cards, write your speech on just the themes. So for example, point 1, point 2, point 3, with just one word as an aide-memoire. Psychologists have even said that light blue is the best color to use because it's not going to freak you out as much as black and white. Incredibly important to number the business cards though. You can hold them in your hand, nobody can see that you've got them, but you must number them because if you're that frightened, you drop them on the floor and they all get mixed up, you won't know what order to put them back into. So that's a really, yeah, that's a really important lesson. Do you have any tips for the moment when your mind goes blank completely on stage? Yeah, have the cards. Have the cards inside your hand, and that will enable you to keep limping on until the end. What do you do when you don't know the answer to a question, but you don't have an audience? Well, in that case, I would presume it's just somebody who's asking you a question and it's a one-to-one situation. What I would always ask myself is, should I know the answer to that question? So if someone comes up to you and says, what is the meaning of life? You can afford to be a little bit vague and woolly. If you're the financial director of a company and someone says, here, how much money did we make last year? And you go, no idea at all, sorry, ask me another one. It doesn't look so good. So again, a lot will depend on you looking at the particular question and analyzing whether you should know the answer to that. So for example, you are, I don't know, an orthopedic surgeon, and someone says, just out of curiosity, how many bones are there in the body? And you go, no idea at all. Does anyone maybe know the answer to that? Any tips on handling the night before stress? A lot of people report a sleepless night the night before a big stage event. I don't know, really, in fairness. Maybe try and keep the same routine. Don't try anything different. I mean, last night, I was actually thinking about having a vindaloo curry, which is extremely spicy, and I thought, not such a good idea. You know, a light supper helps. Avoid alcohol the night before. Certainly avoid caffeine. No electronics an hour before bed. If you do wake up, bit of background reading, something light. So yeah, any of those things would help. Headspace, you can download the Headspace app. It'll take you through guided meditations. I believe the first 10 are free. That's, you know, anything like that would help.
If there aren't any questions, may I ask one of you, Alistair, which is, how do you handle stress going from Toastmasters, which is a supportive environment, to the big stage, whether it's physical or online? I'm sure you had some kind of retuning there.
Well, I mentioned before that sometimes careers have been ruined by question and answer sessions, and they have been. It happened to me once. One of our I worked for a baby box company. Basically what happened, we sent a box with samples to pregnant women and women who'd just given birth. And inside there would be, you know, there would be examples of say, you know, baby food, diapers, women's magazines, this kind of stuff. And one of our competitors had indeed bought a ticket, which they were perfectly entitled to do. And they turned up at the conference and they basically wanted to destroy me in front of our audience, which were 350 people, and most of them were our clients. Mm-hmm. So basically, what you need to do in that case is that you need to keep calm and make sure that you've understood the question. It's always a good idea to be able to paraphrase it, because chances are the people who are most interested in destroying your career will sit at the front. And they will be so excited that they will shout the question to you without waiting for the microphone to come around, which was a fatal mistake because it enabled me to paraphrase the question. And she said, you people are thieves and liars. I know you don't have any research in order to back up what you're saying. And I could make it a little calmer by saying, so you're inquiring about our research methodology in order for us to have the claims that we have for our particular service. Is that right? She went, yeah. And that enabled me, first I could make it more gentle. And then after that, it gave me valuable time to think and then of course, counterattack. And it was quite gratifying because one of her clients told her to sit down and shut up. It really, really backfired badly. But I have been at conferences. You see, it's worth obviously COVID's changed things now, but back in the day, it was worth taking a flight, buying €1,000 to an event and staying in a hotel for 2 nights so that you could attend the speech which one of your competitors was giving, and you could destroy them. You could embarrass them. You could bring up some scandal. I mean, it's horrible. Business is nasty. And I've seen people do it.
Wow.
So in that situation, you need to be really, really on your toes.
But I really love the technique you say that. I will remember that. It's the paraphrasing. So taking a step back and paraphrase and just take control.
The thing is as well, which is even better than that, you can absolutely hammer them if you feel like being vindictive, because they'll try and come back with a second question. And then you just go, David, look, there are 350 people in the audience. You're a specialist. I'm a specialist. I don't think everybody wants to hear an answer to a very, very detailed technical aspect. And certainly I can't do it justice in just a few minutes. So why don't you and me meet for a coffee afterwards? I'd be happy to show you the research.
That is fabulous. Thank you.
And they try a third time and you go, I'm sorry, David, I've already answered your question. Oh, I can see there's a lady in the back. Miss, what's your question? So you just shut them down as much as you possibly can, as quickly as you can. And then if they've got a real legitimate concern and you're on thin ice, I always ask to meet them later. And then afterwards you go, oh, David, sorry, I've got to go back to the office now. Boss just called. Bye.
Cool. Well, thank you again for that. And we have time for one final question. Do you want to take Mary's question? Would you not challenge a hostile question?
I think what helps as well is to find out, first of all, what's the cause is, who that person is. You've identified them. If it's a competitor, you can diffuse it a little bit by saying, oh, that's a nasty question. And it's coming from a leading competitor. Now there's a surprise. If it's, for example, you're giving a press conference because the oil refinery is blown up and a lady said, my husband and son were killed in the fire. He told you 4 times last week that the oil refinery was unsafe and dangerous. In that situation, you don't want to be challenging. You need to be saying, you need to be extremely sympathetic, extremely empathetic, to say that you're going to get to the bottom of this. It's too early to comment, and you'll try and diffuse it as much as you can. So it will always depend on the circumstance.
Understood. Well, thank you. And with that, I think we'll close here, but thank you for staying behind and answering these questions from the audience. And thank you, audience, for staying back as well. For you to go to another workshop, you just leave the room here by the leave button, and then you can go back to the agenda and choose your next workshop. But for now, thank you, Alistair.
Well, thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you.